As I speak to experts, there seems to be an overwhelming overtone that they are pained and upset, but not surprised. How do you look at this?
I'm afraid they're right. I mean, there is sadly a pretty grim track record of horrendous tragedies in which our migrant workers, and since I'm a political representative in Kerala, let me say particularly Malayali migrant workers, have really come afoul of all sorts of terrible situations abroad. In just recent years, we have lost Indians who have been press ganged into the war front in Russia. We have lost people who got pulled into situations abroad, like the Olympic construction in Qatar, where so many died, and now we've got this fire. So it's a combination, it seems to me, of a great deal of, to put it very bluntly, desperation on the part of Indians to find any remunerative work anywhere in whatever conditions, because the job market is so dreadful. And at the same time, the fact that we don't, as a government or as a country, do enough to ensure protection of our migrant workers in these situations. I'm somebody who spent some time on this issue. Would be a first important step. I'm sorry to say that they've simply not been able let the world do what is needed to be done, that we want craft a credible new immigration to enjoy when they go abroad.
Mr. Tharoor, from being often called as the invisible workers or the invisible migrants, to the huge value that they add to India and its economies, families are currently grieving. But isn't this the reality that even in India today, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough agencies and even experts to look out for them? I mean, to get even data on them at an all-India perspective is a huge challenge.
In fact, this is precisely the problem. If we look at, for example, the time when so many Indians had to be repatriated because of COVID from countries in the Gulf, their employers could no longer support them there was no work going on, people came back in a rush. And these are countries in the Gulf that don't have very labor-friendly laws. Many of them came back empty-handed with absolutely no way of collecting their own unpaid wages that were pending when COVID struck and they were all pushed out. That's a good example of something where India should have done much more to support the wage rights of our people. The other concern I have is very, very seriously that the purpose of an Immigration Act would be to give people certain protections by law, which can then be enforced by law. A lot of these migrants fall victim to touts and agents who basically come and spin them a tall story, get them to sign contracts that they don't fully understand. And when they go to the countries in the Gulf, they discover their situation is quite different. That is the problem that we need to be able to address right here. We need also to stop this distinction we have right now between those who have immigration clearance required passports and those who don't have immigration clearance required passports and so on. I think very frankly, anyone qualifying as a migrant laborer deserves the protection of the government, and we should ensure that the chances of their being exploited in foreign countries, I must say that certainly that requires protections starting from here, starting from the initial contract with the agents or the employers, and then of course an agreement with the host governments to ensure the governments also have a stake in ensuring that the agreements are upheld. Well, I mean, the fact is that our government has the custodianship, as it were, of a legislative framework that protects or fails to protect migrants. It's the Immigration Act of 1983. I have been clamoring for years to have that act completely updated to take into account the new circumstances 41 years later. And I'm sorry to say that despite discussions within the External Affairs Committee when I was chairman, with the then Foreign Secretary, who is now the Foreign Minister, who was very accommodative of our demands and said he would take action, we haven't seen anything like a draft bill emerging. See, there are a number of issues we need to do to ensure that the lives, livelihoods, conditions of work, conditions of residence of our migrants are guaranteed, first of all, in contracts that employers must sign, and secondly, in terms of foolproof agreements between our government and the host governments. These things are, of course, a challenge, but the bill, the act, once it passes, would be a first important step in ensuring that we let the world know there are some basic standards that we want Indian migrant workers to enjoy when they go abroad.
Mr. Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much for joining us.